Hi guys, this is Jarrett Struby. I'm here to talk to you about tort liability. Alright, so first thing we need to do is define what is tort liability. Tort liability is a civil wrong for which compensation can be awarded. It's based on the idea that people are responsible for the outcome of their actions, so the consequences of their actions. Um, it can be personal liability, or it could be vicarious liability, meaning that because of the actions of one person or group, an entire organization is held responsible. So there are two types, two broad types. There's intentional and negligence. Intentional are things that are done intentionally. So things like assault and battery, which are two separate things. Assault being um, the intent, and that it's made it clear that there's an intent to harm another person, either physically or otherwise, whereas battery is the physical harming of someone else. There's also defamation, so if if your words cause harm to someone, that's considered intentional tort case. And there's also trespassing as well as unlawful imprisonment. Then there is the second, negligence or unintentional tort, which is what's generally involved in education is negligence. Most cases are negligent cases. So it's based on the standard of care and breach of duty. Um, so the first case that I'm going to talk to you about is Johnson Johnson versus the School District of Millard. So the summary of this is that there was first grade music class. Um, the teacher taught them the song London Bridge is Falling Down, and then taught them the game that's associated with it, where two students put their link hands and put their arms around a third student and kind of jostle them around a little bit. Um, so the teacher taught them how to do this once. This is the first time that they ever played it. And told the students to not jostle the third student around too much. And while they were playing, they did, of course, jostle them around a little too much, and their hands came unclasped, and the student fell into a bookshelf and sustained a cut on his head and had to get stitches. So a suit was brought against the district for negligence because the teacher was facing the board with her back to the students when this occurred. Um, so the basic idea here is that um, the premise of the case, I guess I should say, was that the teacher was negligent by not providing enough supervision to the children, especially since that this was the first time the students had ever played this game. So that early on in the process, they're saying that the teacher should have been paying more attention than she was. Now, the reaction this would receive in my school would be a little different because we're a high school. So generally speaking, legally, um, the the threshold for supervision is a lot higher for younger students than it is for older students. It's generally accepted that older students should be allowed a little bit more autonomy. Um, but if something similar to this were to happen, um, there would be a lot of training around classroom safety and modeling safety, and there'd be a lot of emphasis around making sure the students understand expectations for safety of themselves and others. Some proactive measures that can be taken to avoid a situation like this would be to make sure that anytime any activity is undertaken, that safety concerns are addressed, and also to really reinforce those behavioral expectations in our schools and in our classrooms. And the ethics portion of this is that it is the responsibility of educators to be aware of possible safety concerns, even if it's a game like London Bridge is Falling Down, which is a pretty innocent game. Um, it is the responsibility of teachers and schools to recognize that there is a possibility of something going wrong and trying to make sure we address that. In this instance, I believe that a little bit more supervision early on in this lesson and um, a better review of what our expectations are, what could have possibly prevented this from happening. The second case we're going to talk about is Hoyam versus Manhattan Beach City School District. In this case, there's a 10-year-old student who is attending a summer program who decided to leave early. And the student did not have permission to leave early. The student just left. And about 4 blocks away, while crossing the street, the student was hit by a motorcycle. So the case was brought against the district because it was felt that they failed in their duty to provide adequate supervision for the student. Even though the student did not have permission to leave, was thought that it was the teachers and schools' responsibility to make sure that that student was at the school. It went to court and eventually made its way to the California Supreme Court, who found that the school was negligent because of inadequate supervision. So the reaction in my school would be increased supervision of exits by security, administration, and teachers, and student parents would probably receive a letter reinforcing the expectations for truancy, reinforcing the expectations that we don't leave school without permission. Proactive measures that you can take to make sure something like this doesn't happen are that increased emphasis on building a relationship with students so that A, they don't want to leave, or B, they understand that they're not supposed to, and they have a good enough relationship with people in the building to respect that expectation. Also, another thing you can do, thing that could be done, is potentially put alarms on exits. Um, like a key card, so that people who aren't supposed to be going through doors, it at least alerts someone in the building that happened. And the ethics of this, the reason this is important, is because it is the teacher and school's responsibility to keep track about where our students are. It is our duty, and I can't remember the Latin term, but as kind of the parent for the time they're at school, is to make sure that part of supervision is knowing where they're at. The third case is Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids Community School District. In this case, there was a ninth grade special education student who had a very low IQ, had an IEP, had built a kind of a relationship with a 19-year-old 12th grade special education student. One day they left school. They decided to skip fifth and sixth period, and go hang out. They kind of went to a lot of places, ended up at the 12th grade boy's house. Eventually, the mother found where she was, came and got her immediately. And it came out a few months later that the girl had been sexually assaulted. So a little bit more background into what happened with teachers. This student's teacher, the school didn't have a policy about calling home. The policy was simply that they took attendance. If the student was gone without permission, there was an electronic system in place where they were marked as unexcused absent, and a call was made later that day to tell the parent what classes the student missed unexcused that day. The teacher, however, went above and beyond and talked to the ninth grade student's peers, notified administration herself, and it's unclear whether or not anything happened after that. Um, the case was brought by the mother on behalf of her daughter, um, and it cited negligence because that the school was found negligent of adequately supervising a special education student and did not notify the mother in a timely manner. It was far too late by the time that the parent was notified that the student was missing. So in my school, reaction to this would be a review of policies and procedures. What are we not doing? What are we doing that we could do better? What are we not doing that we need to do? Um, Especially if we need to make special accommodations for special education students. Another reaction in our my school would probably be to have a student assembly about the importance of being in school, about not leaving without permission, and why that's not only important to be in school, but also kind of the legal aspect that we're responsible for them, and that sort of thing. Some measures that can be taken to prevent this is to have these policies and procedures already in place, and have, especially with notification of parents when students aren't or show up absent when they're not supposed to be. And again, back to the alarms on exits, cameras to monitor doors and halls, so that we can just be aware of where students are. And the ethics of this is that it is the school's duty to establish a safe environment for students, um, especially students who have differing needs. Fourth case is Mosley versus Portland School District Number 1J. This is a pretty straightforward case. Uh, a girl was on her lunch period, got into a fight with another student in the hall. The other student produced a knife and stabbed her several times. The mother of the student who was stabbed brought a suit against the school for failing to prevent the attack from occurring. Um, there was security in the building, but none in the area where the attack occurred. So in my school, the reaction to this would be increased supervision of halls. That includes administrative, security, and teachers being in the halls. Um, there would also be increased security at entrances and more thorough searches of students' bags and persons to make sure that there was nothing, no weapons being brought into the building. Proactive measures that can be taken to make sure this doesn't happen is the same thing. Making sure you have enough supervision where it needs to be. Um, and I believe that includes not just security personnel, but administrators and teachers, and making sure you have policies and procedures in place to make sure that weapons aren't being brought into schools. And this is because it is a school's responsibility to make sure that and to ensure the physical safety of its students. The last case I want to talk to you about is Brahacek versus Millard School District. In this case, during a PE class, they were doing a golf class, and a student was hit in the head with a golf club, um, was in the hospital unconscious, and later died from the injury. Um, there were two teachers supervising about 50 students. One of the teachers was a student teacher, and the student who eventually died due to injury was helping another student. The student who accidentally caused the injury had been gone the previous day and had missed the instruction on safety, and the safety had not been gone over again the second day when this student uh, was there. So the suit was brought for wrongful death, and it was because it was felt that the school was negligent for not following procedures, the teachers not following procedures. In my school, obviously, staff reprimanded disciplinary proceedings would result.